of a better place to be on a beautiful Saturday morning that in a room full of pilots and sharing experiences and talking about airplanes and to boot in the middle of an airport. I mean, this is it. It doesn't get better than this. So today what I've got to try to do is, all these meetings, the root of all this meeting is aviation safety. I mean, that's the whole thing that drives the FAA and drives the fasting. So this is no different. One of the things that I like to start my meetings with is with a simple question. I'm a question asker, but I will never ask anyone a question to put them on the spot. I ask questions in general, you answer them to yourself, and then I give you what I think the answer should be. So there's never going to be, do you know this? No, that's not. Although we shouldn't be afraid of not knowing, because nobody knows everything. And one of the things I love by doing these things is that I learn a lot. I learned when you ask me a question that I don't know the answer to. And I'm going to tell you right there, I don't know. Or if I want to save face, I'll probably say, I don't remember now. But I'm going to look up for the answer and let you know. So the first question is this: which is the most important flight time in a pilot's career? You ever thought of that? Well, I did. And my answer to that question is the next one. Because all the ones in the logbook, they're already there. And they're good to impress people. They're good for resumes if you're looking for a job. But the next time you go fly, that's the one that's either going to make you or break you. Do you remember when you went for your private pilot check ride? You remember that pre-flight inspection? Do you still do that today? The same way? I mean, I was an examiner for 26 years. I'd done over 6,000 check rides. And I seen pilots short of a 100-hour inspection on the ramp the day of the check ride. The question is, are we still doing that? Okay, so just food for thought. So on the top corner of most of the slides, that's my email address. You can copy it, and you can ask me any questions. You can send me whatever, but make sure that on the reference you put safety seminars. Otherwise, I just delete them. I don't do that. And I'm a bug about definitions. I know some of you probably have noticed that I do have like a slight accent. I mean, it's almost not there, but I think that you can pick that up. And the reason why I always clarify this before I get to involve in the presentation is because a lot of people think when they hear me talk that I was born somewhere like in Massachusetts or somewhere like that, you know. But that's not the right thing. I'm from Cuban extract. Came to this beautiful country 62 years ago. And Merriam-Webster and myself, we developed a very close relationship through the years, dictionary-wise. I want to make that clear. And so I became an addict to definitions. And that was one of the roads that took me to where I am today and why that book was written, which I'm going to talk about it later. Definition of safety. We talk about safety, but do we know the definition of safety? So I looked it up, and the best definition of safety I found was this: safety is the freedom from conditions that can cause death, injury, or illness, damage or loss of equipment or property, and or damage to the environment. See, when you think safety, this is what you got to think about. Not just, I'm a safe pilot. Why are you a safe pilot? Because you want to avoid all this. So sometimes we use words that really hide the real meaning of the word. Humans are like that, because if I gotta talk about safety and say this every time, it's tiring. So someone said, let's use one word to cover this, and safety was used. But when we say safety, we don't think of this, which is the actual meaning of the word. And that's what I found when I was reading definitions throughout my life. And Flying Colors Terrain Solutions, that's my company, and this is the aviation safety message. We can only choose two options in aviation safety. We can be part of safety, or aviation safety must be a part of us. So both of them go together. But number two is the difference between dedication and commitment. And everybody can be dedicated to safety in the aviation business. Pilots have to be committed to safety. Because once you're up there, that's it. It's you and the machine. You could be talking to a controller, but the controller will say, climb, turn right, descend, turn left, airport 12 o'clock. Do you have it inside? And you go, no. And the controller says, may the Lord have mercy on your soul. Because you are the only one at the end of the day that had to do what needs to be done. So, why are you here? There are many reasons why you're here. Maybe you may remember something. Maybe you learned something, things of that nature. That's what I do when I go to seminars, and I try to go as many as I can, because I have learned from pilots with 60 hours, doing check rides. And who taught you that? Oh, because remember, I only know what I know. And I can only talk about that's why I encourage questions. At the end, if you have any questions, please shoot. So why am I here? Well, this is one of the reasons. When a hunter is too old to hunt, he shows all the hunters how to read deer poop. So this is one of the motivations, I guess, for experience. What you call experience, then you want to share that with people. It doesn't matter what you do. You could be a hunter, you could be a biker, you could be whatever. But the real reason I'm here is because I'm going to ruffle your feathers a little bit, try to make you laugh a little, make you think a lot, and hopefully everything at the same time. And of course, I said it before, if you ask me a question, then I'm going to learn, especially if I don't know the answer to the question. So disclaimer number one, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, okay? I learned to fly just like everybody else. I've been around like everybody else. As a matter of fact, I bounce on runways. Anybody? Right? I bounce on runways so bad that I used to be 5'12", and look at me now. And that's after chiropractic sessions and everything. Lost on cross country. And, well, not really lost, but temporarily disoriented, because you really never lost. One time a pilot said, well, I went on a cross country and I got lost. And I said, no, you didn't get lost. He said, oh, yeah. I said, no, you really weren't lost. He says, how do you know if you weren't there? I said, can I ask you a few questions? He says, yeah. I said, what state were you flying over? Florida. Okay, do you think you were in northern Florida or southern Florida? I think it was more like southern, because I was going to Fort Myers. Okay, do you think you were on the east side of Florida? Or you see where I'm going with this? You're not lost. When you accept that you're lost, you go into a panic mode. And once you go into a panic mode, you stop thinking. Then you get in trouble. But you never lost. You just, you know what? I'm temporarily disoriented. Let me do some turns here and get myself together. Let me try to talk to somebody. And you'll find out that everything will work out fine. And behind the airplane, anybody familiar with that? Of course. I remember my primary instructor, God, may the Lord always bless him. He told me one time, he says, Diego, you're so far behind this aircraft. If we crash right now, you need a taxi to take us to the scene of the accident. That's how far behind you are. And we need to sit where? On the spinner. When we're flying, we need to be sitting on this. You can't go back because the prop's going to get you. You got to be ahead of the game. You got to be three things ahead. Three things ahead. The minute those wheels come off the ground, three things ahead. They're already in your mind. It has been rehearsed. Any CFIs in the room?
Previous.
Great. Well, you know what? I think that the most important link in the aviation business is the CFI and the student. Because without them, what do we have? Think about this. That's why CFIs have to take care of the student, and students have to go by what their CFI told them to do. Okay, my school buster, I had a school in Orlando. It's better to deal with our lack of knowledge in an effort to eliminate it than to allow it to eliminate us. So it's nothing wrong to say, hey, I don't know that. I'm a big proponent of that statement. And this is my motto. I developed this through the years. I've been teaching for 50 years, and I've done lots of check rides. Show me a pilot that can't answer a correlated question or can't perform a procedure or maneuver within FAA standards, and I'll show you a pilot without enough knowledge to understand what he or she is trying to accomplish. If you are out there and you have a problem with something, you don't understand it. You have to go back. Maybe you don't have enough knowledge. We all can do everything. Anybody can fly an airplane. Anybody can fly an airplane. So the formula for safe flying is, my opinion, 80% knowing, 15% doing, and 5% luck. And unfortunately, when we're learning to fly, we don't want to read too much. We want to do too much. Because that's the origin of flight. I have researched the instruction, the flight instruction, all the way back until the first license that was officially issued in this country, to Mr. McCarran, who was the director of the first CAA. And you know what the test entailed back in the day? The pilot will take off, will do 2 8 figures, and land. And he was issued the pilot certificate. There was no oral. There was no knowledge required. It was due. Actually, I see a lot of gray hair here. Probably when you got your private license, the oral was probably maybe 20 minutes.
I disagree.
Okay.
You gave me my oral.
No, I'm talking way back.
Way back.
Way back. And
Did he ask you?
35 years ago.
Did he ask you? Do you
your face was familiar though.
do you want to come back another time?
No, he didn't ask me that.
Maybe that's when my hair turned white. Now I know. So anyway, that's how we came across. So in 1955, they created a technical manual called Technical Manual 105. And then in 58, Technical Manual 108. And it didn't talk about formulas or lift coefficient and lift versus drag. None of that stuff. It was show me how to do a stall, show me how to do lazy 8, show me how to do, show me. So it is okay that we're like that. That's my logo. And this is the series, Flight Training Missing Links. And today we're going to talk about loss of control in flight, which happens to be the only accident type that we haven't been able to conquer. We still, and it's taking its toll every year. I believe that every 4 days there is a loss of control accident somewhere in the world. Every 4 days it's happening, according to the latest statistics, AOPA. All right. First, I want to show you how sometimes we fall into a situation where we just hear something, we learn things by someone saying it, and we really never dig. And this is a question: how many legs make up the airport traffic pattern? Now, this is private pilot stuff, right? A, 4, B, 5, C, 6, D, 7, or none of the above. Just think about it. I'm not going to qualify that right now. We're going to do that later. Renting an aircraft. Now, we all know when you go rent an aircraft, right, what do? You say to the person, hey, can I see the logbooks, please? Because you wanna make sure that it complies with the inspections and all the things, ADs and everything. But then you say to the guy, hey, this 172 you wanna rent me, it doesn't have 100-hour inspection. And the guy says, don't worry about it, you don't need it. You just go ahead and fly. You don't need a 100-hour inspection. Go. A, it's not legal. B, it's legal to fly to a shop. C, it's legal to fly within 50 nautical miles. It's legal to fly regardless. So those are the four answers when I think about that. Oh, and B and C. Legal to fly to a shop and legal to fly within 50 nautical miles. And I'm gonna go over this later. I just planted that. Another question I wanna ask you is, that airplane is doing 120 knots. And there is a tailwind of 40 knots. At the end of 1 hour, here on segment 2, here's the question. How many nautical miles the airplane flew? Was it 140, 180, 160, or none of the above? The next question is the wind pushing the airplane? Is the wind striking the airplane? The airplane is striking the wind. Both B and C. And E, none of the above. Okay? We go to the next question. Now, same scenario, but now there is a 40-knot headwind. After 1 hour, how many nautical miles has the airplane flown? 160, 100, 80, or none of the above? Is the wind striking the airplane? Is the airplane striking the wind? Is the wind pushing the airplane? Both A and B, or none of the above? Next question. The airplane is flying at 40 knots into a 40-knot wind. After 1 hour, how many nautical miles did the airplane fly? 80, 40, 0, or none of the above? Is the wind pushing the airplane? The wind is striking the airplane. The airplane is striking the wind. B and C, or none of the above? And this one, the airplane is flying at 30 knots. By the way, this airplane I built for the book, I call it the super plane, and it does unbelievable things. It has a very low stall speed, although the slowest stall speed of any airplane in the world is the Russian, is the A2, the name escaped, it's a biplane.
Antonov.
Actually,
Antonov, AN2.
Antonov AN2, right? Actually, the manual doesn't describe stalls. It can fly at 20 miles an hour. Miles an hour. So I built the airplane for the purpose of the book. So if the airplane is flying at 30 knots into a 40-knot wind, and the wind stops all of a sudden, what happens? The airplane VS stall speed is 25 knots. So that airplane is flying within 5 knots of the stall speed, and the wind goes shoop and stops. Weird questions, right? You probably never faced these kind of questions because we go too fast on things. We really need to look down deep at every little corner. So if the wind stops completely, A, the airplane maintains altitude and we lose airspeed. B, it maintains same airspeed and we lose altitude. C, it will lose airspeed, stall, and lose altitude. D, none of the above. Now, airplane 1, identical airplane. Airplane 1 is taking off into a 20-knot wind. Airplane 2 is taking off with a 20-knot tailwind. Both airplanes perform identically, okay? Here's the first question. If both airplanes maintain the same recommended climb out speed of 70 knots, which one will reach 1,000 feet of altitude first? The timing for both airplanes begin the minute they lift off. So everything is equal to the whole thing. Airplane 1 or airplane 2? And the other question is, which airplane develops more lift in the climb? Airplane 1 develops more lift than airplane 2 during the climb. Is that true or false? And the last one is, plane is cruising at 120 knots, altitude 5,000 feet and mean sea level, on a magnetic heading of due south, and the wind is from 120 from the southeast. Is there any tool that allows the pilot to determine the headwind and crosswind components in this scenario? Think about that. I'm going to go over that later. Yes or no? So now I'm going to list for you the things that may hurt us. Some of the things that may hurt us that kind of work themselves into this presentation. What we need to know, what we haven't learned. And usually it's basic knowledge. Okay? Sometimes we just move too quick. The other one is what we once knew but don't remember now. That's a bad one too. The other one is what we know and remember, but we cannot proficiently and readily execute. Those three things are bad. But the worst of the bunch, which is covered down, I'm going to show you the picture.
Hey, Doug.
These people have no idea what they're facing. I can tell you that right now. And you know why? Because what we don't know, but what we think we do. That's the worst. Because we act accordingly to what we know. And unfortunately, those are the birth of gray areas and misconceptions. The eye can't see what the mind doesn't know, folks. This is taught in medical school. That saying right there. The eye can't see what the mind doesn't know. It's a very simple thing. It's one of those senses that captures everything, but it needed a receptor that can decipher. And if there's nothing in there to be used to decipher what you're seeing, yes, you look, but you don't see. That type of thing. So, how many legs make up the airport traffic pattern? All right. None of the above. And I'm going to show you. Entry leg, downwind, base, final, departure, crosswind, straight out departure, 45-degree departure, and the upwind leg. 9 legs. Now, I have asked, here's what I used to do when I was an examiner. I never asked a question during the test based on my opinions. I never asked a question to a pilot applicant of something that was not in the books that he or she were supposed to have read for that particular test. But after the test was done, the ones that were unsatisfactory, they never hang around. And I understand, I failed my private check ride when I was coming up. So I know how devastating that is. But the ones that had a satisfactory outcome sometimes stay, and I'll stay with them, and then I ask questions, not trying to test their knowledge, but opinion-wise. And I used to ask that. None of them came up with that answer. Now, why didn't I ask that? Because if I asked that during the test, there is nowhere in the book that says there are 9 legs. Now, they describe it though, because, oh, by the way, and the 3 legs are, these 3 are optional because it depends what you're going to do. If you're gonna stay and, now, where do we find that? Well, Airplane Flying Handbook. Every one of them until 2021, which is the latest one, it says it's right there. It says, especially the upwind leg. The upwind leg is, of course, from parallel to the landing runway in the same direction as landing traffic. That's the upwind. And every pilot thinks that the upwind is when you go on departure. Even controllers sometimes say, stay on the upwind until you're 3 miles from the airport. It's wrong. Why? Because we get used to things and nobody challenges them. And then what happens, we start building up something in our mind that really doesn't exist and we believe is the right thing, which is the worst of the bunch. I'm not going to bore you with all the detail. I just want to show you that it's written. The upwind is written. And then it talks about the departure legs. And then the aim shows you that. And I don't know why they didn't show you this together with that. Because here you have the upwind leg. But on that one, they don't have it. Maybe they're doing all the things, but they should have had the 9 legs. So that the student could be told there are 9 legs, my friend. Now, the ones that we use the most, 4. Doing touch and goes, and maybe 5 if we do a go around. Because the upwind leg is supposed to be flown on a go around, but we don't do it. You're not supposed to, you're supposed to go to the upwind side of the airport on the upwind leg and fly the go around so you can continue watching if there's any airplane taking off or coming. Or where is that airplane going? The reason why you have to do that go around in the first place. Renting an aircraft. It is legal to rent an aircraft without a 100-hour inspection. And I had a situation where I did a check ride. This gentleman was a freelance flight instructor, and I did 2 check rides for him. And the following week, they went to Key West. Coming back, they crashed. They had a malfunction and they crashed. They actually ditched in the water. I get a call from Miami FISDO. I was an examiner. The guy said, Alfonso, I'm calling you because, and he tells me the story. So we went through the logbooks and you have conducted 2 check rides illegally in an illegal airplane. I go, yeah, why is that? He says, because the airplane did not have a 100-hour inspection. So I said to the inspector, I said, well, it's legal. And this is what he said. He said, if that's legal, then everything I know about regulation is not correct. And then I said, well, listen, I'm an examiner. I'm not trying to antagonize. I suggest you check with legal first before you continue. And what happens is that we confuse things because here is 91.4. I'm a mechanic too, by the way. Any mechanics in the house? Okay? I'm a mechanic too. And 91.409 talks about inspections. There's one inspection that every airplane has to have, and that is the annual inspection. No escaping from that. The other one, because the spirit of part A of this is that every airplane has to have an inspection. But part B says, no person may operate an aircraft carrying any person more than a crew member for hire. And no person may give flight instruction for hire. Does it say rent? Because when you look at the definition, see, I'm a bug with definition. Hire, when you hire a limo, they give you a driver. When you rent a car, the guy says, here's the key, stole 22, have a good trip. It's a big difference. And we confuse that. Because all the time I ask that question after check rides, never got the right answer. Everybody said, no, you need a 100-hour inspection. Which, we're erring on the safe side. But there are instances where we're gonna err on the wrong side. And the point I'm trying to bring out is that, now, why, when I rent, I don't need a 100-hour inspection? Because the pilot knows how to determine the airworthiness of the aircraft. You learn to do pre-flight, check the mags, check this, check the other thing. The reason of the 100-hour inspection is the FAA way to protect Joe public that doesn't know anything about flying, that the airplane that he or she are going to hire is airworthy. That's the difference. There's no other difference. I, as a pilot, can determine the airworthiness of my aircraft. My grandmother has to trust the FAA when the FAA says that airplane should have had an annual inspection and a 100-hour inspection before you pay to go there. Now, if you rent an aircraft that doesn't have a 100-hour inspection to give flight instruction, you are now in violation of the law. Because somebody's going to be paying for this that has no knowledge of the airworthiness of the aircraft. The same thing if you're going to rent an aircraft to take somebody to Miami, and then they're going to give you some money for that, then you are on 134.99, which is almost 135. All right, and you really need to be careful, especially now. The FAA, big emphasis now is on 135. There's a lot of 135 operations that have sprung up, and here's the thing. What I learned in my first flight was in 1961. In all those years, what I learned, kind of late, was that you got to look at the spirit of the regulation. When you start looking at the angle of the regulation, you are carving your way into trouble. Sooner or later, you're going to get. What happens is the FAA doesn't. You ever see an FAA inspector with a speed thing, see you taxi too fast? Never see that. The FAA works on complaints. We saw this. This guy was flying low. But other than that, the FAA really doesn't patrol. But every once in a while, we have to do inspections. Where I was also an FAA inspector. You got to do, I think it's 5 inspections a year. You know, so really that's not the emphasis. Okay. I already explained that. Now, you can do pilot services. If you have an airplane and you want somebody to fly for you, that's a different thing. Now, there are different levels of inspections in different in different uses of airplanes. There are some inspections, some airplanes that have to go through 2 or 3 different inspection A, B, C, so forth and so on, especially the turbojets and the jets and things like that. But in the whole world. Now, had I just said that there are 9 legs to the traffic pattern, or that it's legal to fly, rent an airplane without a 100-hour inspection, your mind will have shut down immediately. Because that conflicts on the average. I don't like to generalize, on the average. Because it conflicts directly with what you think. And normally we go, now there's exceptions to every rule, but normally we go like this. If you're in a dark room for half an hour, 20 minutes, somebody comes in and turns the light on, the real button light, what is the first thing you're gonna do? Close your eyes. That's exactly what the mind does. When it's hit with something that doesn't agree with us, generally, that's what happens. And what I'm going to present to you from now on is one of those things that goes totally against the grain, okay? And I finish this, and I got to do, if you guys want to take 5 minutes, while I change the program, I would do that. is worth his name is happy when they discover that something in the past was wrong and makes better their thesis. And that's where I come in. That's what I did. I truly believe this. I really do. That's the cover of my book. This is the front cover, and that's the back cover. I was in Africa teaching at the Nigerian College of Aeronautical Technologies, and I learned that refrain: not to know is bad. Not wanting to know is even worse. They say that over there. I learned that over there. All these words that are being used today in our theory of flight are conflicting because they don't apply. And I prove that in the book. Such as airspeed indicator, relative wind, wind tunnel, airspeed, airflow, tailwind, airstream, crosswind, airfoil, wind strikes, headwind, and deflection. So I'm gonna, first of all, tell you that the purpose of me pushing the book is not to become a millionaire. Why? Because I did my research. And there are 1.5 to 2 million pilots in the world. But out of those, only 330,000 about are active. Out of those, 99.99% think they know it all, including me. So that leaves me with 3,300 pilots that may buy my book. And even if I make $20, I will come up with about $66,000, which would be enough for the down payment I'm planning on a house on the Bahamas. But that's another thing. So the reason why I'm doing this is because I really want to spread the message. And I don't want you to believe anything I say. Nothing. I want you to doubt everything, but keep the mind open to verify or to look further into it. Don't shut down. But don't believe anything I say until it makes sense to you or you can verify it anyway. And the reason why I say that is because I hope that I'm talking to you today from now on and you are listening to what I'm saying. And the best way I can put this together is, I don't know if you ever heard the plumber story. And a plumber wrote a letter to the housing department. And he said, I am a plumber. Can I put hydrochloric acid in pipe? Thank you. So 2-3 months later, you know government, 2-3 months later, he gets the answer. And the answer says, dear sir, the efficacy of the method is undeniable. However, the corrosive particles are not conducive to metallic premises, so therefore we suggest an alternate method. And the guy looks and says, what? All I want to know is, can I put hydrochloric acid in pipe? And he sends a letter back and he says, all I want to know is, and then somebody over there in complete empathy wrote him back and he says, don't do it, Mike. It's going to eat the hell out of the pipe. And the point is that sometimes we talk and we dress a lot when we really need to go to the point. And that's what I'm trying to do today, is just to go right to the point. The first basic link is that any floating or flying or moving object, including aircraft, don't feel the wind. Wind has no effect on anything that flies. Keep that on mind. That's the first thought. The wind never strikes an airborne object, and an airborne object never strikes the wind. That's just the way it is. The first time I said this was at Sun and Fun, and half of the people got away. There were 220 people there, and I bet you about 150 people just got up and left because their mind went choop, and they said, "This guy crazy." The rest, out of courtesy, I guess, they stayed. But probably 99% of them didn't believe what I said either, because it requires to keep an open mind. So from now on, that's what you gotta say, right? I don't believe that, but I'm going to entertain the thought, which is what we should do. Okay, and okay, we did that. We did that already, and we did that. And this is just one of the main 15 points that I have in the book. And at the end, I will talk about those. Now, here is how I represent anything that an airplane does. You know what those are? Air molecules. There is no graphic anywhere that does that. The reason why I do that is because the interaction of an airplane is not with an air mass, it's not with the wind, it's with the air molecule. The air molecule. So I have it there in every graphic so it keeps the pilot focused on the fact that everything that the airplane does is in relation to the air molecule. Then we have east and west. All the movements are east to west. And this represents an air mass, which is, air mass are not really rectangular like that. They got all kinds of form, but I try to. And then I have a balloon, a blimp, and my airplane, my super plane. And I know you're thinking now, hey, I'm a plane driver. What do I have a balloon for? Okay, because we need to go from the simple to the complex and from the known to the unknown. When we're taught how to fly, we present an airplane already in flight. We really don't understand what happened from the very beginning. But when the airplane is on the ground, it's not flying. The airplane is flying once it's flying. And in order to know what happens there, we got to start from standing still. And I'm going to go there. So what does, so the interaction of anything from life with the air molecules. So we got that. The air molecules are stationary. All flying and drifting takes place from east to west. Now we're going to find out the roles of the balloon, the role of the blimp, and the role of an airplane. Do you know the roles of an airplane? There's 5 of them. But let's talk about the blimp first. The blimp ascends. Then it floats. And the minute it floats, it becomes an air molecule. It's a gigantic air molecule. Because when that air mass moves, the blimp moves exactly at the same speed and in the same direction as the air molecules that make the air mass. Are we together on this? Do I hear an amen?
Amen.
Okay. And of course, when the air mass moves, it drifts. The blimp has 6 roles. It can ascend if it wants to, just ascend. It floats, and it also becomes a gigantic air molecule, just like a balloon. It drifts if the air mass flows. It flies if it wants to. Right now, the air mass is stationary. It can start flying, crank that engine and go. And if the air mass is moving, it can fly and drift at the same time. Although 2 different things that we cannot separate visually. Because when you see an airplane or a blimp going, you don't know how much of that is flying and how much of it is drifting. Can't tell that. So I try to bring that into the pilot's mind, this. So the pilot understands it. And then we got the airplane. We got 5 roles. Landcraft, floats. And here's the thing. The airplane floats exactly the same way as a blimp, but it cannot achieve floating in the same fashion. Because this one ascends and floats, and this one, because they displace their weight in air molecules. Once that happens, they go up. Just like a submarine that's on the bottom of the ocean. It's at the bottom of the ocean because it weighs more than the water molecules that it displaces. But when the submarine starts to throw out the water, now it starts to weigh less, the submarine is going to start coming up on the thing. The airplane is the same principle, but it has to displace the its weight in air molecules by moving. Cannot do it this way. That's why it has to start on the ground. To go, and here's the airplane weighing 3,000 pounds. By the minute you get to lift off, the airplane relative to the ground, the weight is zero. At that moment, the airplane has displaced its weight in air molecules and it's equal now and floats. But because it has an engine and a propeller, it also flies at the same time. And if the air mass is moving, it flies and drifts at the same time. So we together in this? Okay. Let's go. Now we know the rules, okay? Okay. Now, if an airplane has to be shown beginning to fly from floating, how am I going to do that? See, that's what I went and I made the super airplane. I created a shackle system. Remember the B-29 and the X-1, Jaeger, right? Well, that and the X-15 and the B-52, and then I created a super plane. I know you guys, this guy is on something. I know that, but you got to keep going. You got to keep going. So, and then if I shackle the blimp with the airplane, I can make it float. And they're going to start flying from zero. But before we get there, because we're going to talk about flight now. Do you remember the definition of flight? Have you ever read the definition of flight? You know the definition of flight is not in any training manual. Because it's assumed that everybody knows what flying is. You can go. Listen, it took me 19 years to research what I wrote. It's not there. So I went to my friends, the dictionaries. One of them says, an occasion when something flies or moves through the air. That's the Oxford Dictionary. An act or instance of passing through the air by the use of wings. That's Merriam-Webster number 1. A passing through the air or through space outside the Earth's atmosphere. Merriam-Webster number 2. The action or process of flying through the air. Cambridge. Now, four of them from 4 different dictionaries, explain a different way, but conveying the same thought. But the thing that is equal in all of them is this. It has to go through the air. If it's not going through the air, it's not flying. That's why the balloon doesn't fly. But you know how people say, I took a flight in the balloon. No, you didn't. You drifted. But see, that doesn't sound that they're in control of the balloon. And it drives people away. He said, what? Drift? No. I want somebody to drive this thing. Don't worry. I fly a balloon. No, you don't. The only time you fly a balloon is when the balloon ascends. It's moving through the air. The minute it floats, stop flying. Starts moving with the air mass, it's drifting, not flying. Do I hear an amen on that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, that is the thing. Now, molecules are stationary, and now I got the super trio. Right? Now watch what, and we can say now that the air molecules are stationary relative to them. They are stationary relative to the air molecules. Can we agree on that? Now watch what's going to happen. They're going to crank the engine, but they're going to start on flight idle. For those of you that may not know what flight idle is, the prop is not doing anything. It's flat. They just started the engine because they want to get ready to go. So I did that so that you notice what happens here. See that? they are striking the air molecules. They are flying now, and they are striking the air molecules, and they're doing 30 knots. And it'll continue to fly. The interesting thing is, and don't shut your mind, is that that will happen the same way even if there's wind. The air molecules are always stationary relative to a flying object, always. Okay, here we go. Now notice that the balloon remains stationary because he doesn't fly. Now comes the beauty. Remains stationary, they come in and say, okay, you got enough speed now to be on your own. Come on. Oh. Here's what I just went over something. This is the first time I'm doing this presentation, by the way. So, can we agree that they are the ones striking the air? Is that correct? And that the air is not moving? Then why do we call it airspeed? Why do, if it is not moving? The air is not moving at all. The blimp and the airplane are striking the stationary air. The air is not moving. And we call it the airspeed indicator. No. That indicates the speed of the airplane and the blimp. Every time. This, when we use the term airspeed, think about this. It's like saying to a driver, what you read on the speedometer is the road speed. That's exactly what happened. If you're doing 80 and you think the road is doing 80, my friend, you have a big confusion in your mind. And this is the same thing that happens to us pilots. It happened to me. It was shocking to me when I realized that I was drifting backwards on a short field approach to a runway. And that's what started me on this, on this road, down this rabbit hole. Because I couldn't explain it and nobody could explain it to me either. And then I said, well, I'm going to find out. And that happened to me up in Jersey. Anybody from Jersey? Trinca Airport. And the winds over there, I used to report traffic for a company called Shadow Traffic back in the 70s. And I used to be airborne by 6 a.m. And in the wintertime, you got winds at 2,000 feet, they're at 60 knots. And I'm flying at 150, that I can fly at 38 miles per hour. And I believe in PPT, which is a personal proficiency plan. That every time you're flying, you should be practicing something, except if you're IFR. But if you go on a 300 miles VFR cross country, why don't you do some slow flight on the way? Make a couple of stick turns. Maybe do a stall. I mean, 5-10 minutes is going to deter you from where you're going. And you're going to land, do a short field approach or a soft field approach. Do a short field every time. And you're not waiting for that 2-year deal going with the CFI to prove that you can jump through the hoop. And that's what I did. And I was coming to Trinca Airport. I was landing to the northeast. And I said, I'm going to do a short field approach. I'm indicating 50 miles an hour, and the airplane is moving backwards. And that shocked me. I was supposed to pick up a student there. I landed, and the student was there. I said, today is no flying. You go home. But I stayed. After he left, I stayed. And I did about 15 takeoffs and lands. And I started to build up that confidence with wind. And then I wanted it to win. I wanted the days that were windy. And I learned to hover to a landing. And landing backwards. You can land backwards if the conditions are right. Now, I never taught that because in the FAA, there is 2 rules. One is you're either reckless or careless. And I was afraid that even though I knew what I was doing, to be teaching something that could be considered by someone that doesn't know what I know, to be careless or reckless. And kept me from teaching that, even to my son. So that's the equivalent of that confusion. Now they go boop, and the airplane started. But you saw the airplane started to fly from nothing, striking the air molecules, which is exactly what the airplane does. What happens is when it's on the ground, it's doing the same thing. But when it gets airborne, then it becomes also an air molecule. An airplane is a gigantic air molecule, and it will drift just like the balloon does and just like the blimp does. Now, if you increase the speed 30 and you increase it to 120, the only thing it increases is the drag. You haven't heard me say relative wind jet, because that doesn't exist. I didn't say that. If you look at the FAA manual in 1965 and 1984, it says relative wind doesn't exist. We call it the wind of flight. And then I said, if it doesn't exist, why are there 6 different definitions of something that doesn't exist? Didn't make sense. And the FAA said, well, not the FAA. The FAA wrote what scientists told them. The FAA didn't have scientists. The first book that was written in aerodynamics seriously was written in 1965, I believe, by the aerodynamics for Navy aviators. And the FAA got most of that information into but either exists or it doesn't exist. So relative wind doesn't exist, and I'm going to prove that. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about wind now, but do you remember the definition of wind? AC 06B has that definition. It's the only one. Wind is the natural horizontal motion of air over the surface of the earth. End of definition. That is true, but I feel that for pilots, it's not complete. We need something else. Because wind here is one thing and wind there is another thing. But we know wind from here only. We've been programmed to feel the wind. Over there, nobody feels the wind. Everybody drifts with the wind. Okay, so I took that definition and modified it without changing its meaning, but to make it a little more friendly for us. And it says, wind is the natural horizontal drifting of air molecules at any speed and direction over the surface of the earth. You ever wonder why they came up with the word wind? It's just, remember when I talk about safety? If you think of safety, you never think of the other stuff. But they say, have you ever heard someone say, you know, the air molecules are drifting very strong today. I can feel it. You ever heard anyone say that? But that's exactly what's happening. So they say, wait a minute, that's too long. Let's find a word that will encompass that. And somebody said, wind. Okay, wind. But now what happens, when you hear the word wind, you don't visualize the air molecules. You know what you visualize? Palm trees swaying, leaves rustling, flags fluttering, smoke. You never visualize the air molecules. And as pilots, that's what we need to visualize, because that's our interaction. That's our direct interaction right there. Okay. Remember the definition of drift, because we're going to talk about wind and drift. You see, in my book, when I bring something, I define it right there, not in the back of the book. No, right there, so that you and I are still on the same page. I'm talking, and you know it's going to eat the hell out of the pipe. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. So the most popular dictionary, they're all single liners. To be carried slowly by a current of air, a continuous slow moving from one place to the other, a slow and gradual movement or change from one place to the other under external influences, such as the motion of an aircraft or boat due to wind or water current. Drift is perceived as an easy motor, more or less steady flow sweep along a spatial and marine course. the lateral motion on aircraft. Nowhere in there it says that we drift forward and backwards. Because we can't see it. It's all lateral. As a matter of fact, when you were flying with your instructor and you had that VOR needle not in the middle there or the course over the ground and the needle started to go, the instructor most likely would say, "You're starting to drift now." No, you were drifting all the time. Now you're drifting more. Because we really don't understand the term drift. Okay. I think there should be a general definition of drift. Now, who in charge me of changing? I'm not changing the English language. I'm just showing to you what made me see things the easy way. You accept it or reject it, that's okay. But this is what I had to do to my mind in order to understand what I was trying to get at. So it should be a general definition, the drift, and two separate definitions, one for boats and one for airborne aircraft. So my airborne object aircraft drift definition is, it is the imperceptible constant motion of all airborne objects or aircraft, whether free floating or flying, in the same direction and at the same speed as the air molecules making up a flowing air mass. Now you have a picture of what drift is. Because you know that the air molecules are the ones drifting. And once you're up there, you're one of them. Even when you're free falling as a skydiver, you're just an air molecule. You're falling at the same time you're drifting. When you shoot, what do you think the sniper has a spotter? Because the minute that bullet comes out of that muscle, it becomes an air molecule. And it goes with the wind. It doesn't hit the wind and the wind doesn't hit it. It becomes the wind and goes with the wind. And wind cannot hit the wind. It's very simple. So does an airplane. I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, but it's going to come back. Okay. So there are no definitions of drift in any manual, by the way. The only definition is drift angle, because that's the only thing that we were taught. As a matter of fact, this is another missing link. I used to ask the student, the applicant after, I said, excuse me, the people that pass, in your opinion, why do you think that we use the E6B or the electronic E6B? You know the typical answer? Either to kill, eliminate, offset, counteract, neutralize, get rid of, or cancel the drift. Well, I got news for you. None of that applies. Because you cannot eliminate drift. The real reason, I don't care how hard you try, any airborne object, whether free floating, falling, self-propelled, launched, towed, catapulted, thrown, or fired, is always drifting. The wind triangle, the E6B, the manual electronic is used to determine how much I'm going to allow my airplane to drift so I can maintain a straight line. That's the reason why you do all those calculations. Not to eliminate the drift. If you're flying and you think that you have eliminated, you have a disconnect. Exactly with the wind. You have a complete disconnect. So now, the air mass is going to start going, and everybody's going to go. Because they are air molecules. They're going to be going the same speed, and the same direction. Now, the wind is at 10 knots. They are drifting, but they're going to start flying. See what they did? These are stationary. And now they're going to strike the stationary air molecule because they're drifting together. So the air is not moving. The air is drifting. And the aircraft is drifting at the same speed of the air molecule. And when they start flying, they're going to interact with stationary air molecules, just like if there was no wind. That's why the air molecule is always stationary, regardless. You saw this same thing you saw there. Let me take you to. What happened here? That's not supposed to happen. Okay, here we go. Air mass is stationary. These guys are floating. This is stationary to them, and they are stationary to them. These guys are going to start drifting. Same thing, isn't it? Let me go back again. Do you see what I'm trying to bring to you? What's happening here is the same thing that's happening here, even though they're moving. Even though they're drifting, they're still stationary.
Yeah,
Did we get this?
yeah.
Okay, now we're going to start flying at the same time. Oh, no, don't do that. I'm not going to get paid for this. Yeah. I wonder what happened there. Okay. Compare. Okay. This is this. I was trying to do the tailwind first. Apparently, it's not working. But I got also beginning to fly into a headwind. Same thing. They're stationary over there. They're drifting here. This is the same thing that is happening there. The only thing is they're moving together. Right? Now they're going to start flying at the same time. They're both going to be doing the same thing. The ones on top are going to be hitting the stationary molecules, and this one is going to be striking the stationary molecule. The only difference is this one will fly a little faster because this one has a 10 knot headwind that doesn't exist. You see what I mean? Can anybody see that? Okay, very important. Okay, now I'm going to go to the next. And how are we doing on time?
We're still okay. Yeah.
Okay, I think I got about 10 more minutes. And which I think is probably the eye opener on this. I don't want to bore you guys. Okay. Now I'm going to be answering the questions. Remember that? How many miles did it flew? None of the above. It flew 120 nautical miles. It drifted 40. It only flew through the air mass for, if your speed indicator shows 120 miles, that means that you're flying through that air mass at 120 miles an hour. You would say 160, like I would have said. But it flew 120 and drifted 40. While it was drifting, it was not flying through the air mass. It was flying through the air mass and drifting with the air mass. You see the disconnect? That is exactly what happened. And I used to ask after put this on, and it invariably is 160. Okay. No, it's not 160. You only flew 100, because it's a disconnect in what our understanding, and it's not our fault, it's the system fault. It's the way things were promoted from the very beginning. They were not big in explaining things. All you had to do was show. Show me how to do a stall. Show me how to do the stern. Show me that. Show me. Because it was thought that by doing only, it was okay. But then we understood that no, we need a little bit more than that. Not much more though, because remember, we are machine operators. I was doing a presentation, not this, but similar to this, at a big school, and one of the kids said to me, how come you say you have no formulas in? I said, because we don't need formulas to fly. The Wright brothers were bicycle mechanics. They didn't finish high school. Can you tell? And then I said to him, I'm not being rude. I just want to explore on this. Can you tell me when you're on approach to a landing that you're going, let's see, L equals P squared times V2 minus, yeah, what are you doing? Because we're machine operators. And then I said to him, I said, when you learn how to drive, did you ever figure out that your car was 2,800 pounds? That you were making a 90-degree angle turn? And the angular deflection and the friction on the road and the pressure of the tires? How much do you need to turn that wheel to make that turn? You never thought about that, did you? Oh, because accurate repetition allows you to learn how to operate a machine. And that's what we do, operate a machine. Now, some people may not like that, but down deep, that's what we do. We operate a machine. Okay, so it's 120. Why? Because, remember the definition of flight and drift, right? Okay. Now, is the wind pushing there? No. The airplane is wind. It's drifting at 40 as wind because it is an air molecule and it's going with the wind. It has another role though. It can fly. It drifts and fly. Okay. Now, let me go on this one. Remember that one? Most people say 80 knots, 80 nautical miles. No, 120. What happens is we can't see it. But the airplane is flying at 120 at the same time that it's drifting at 40. So over the ground, it only advanced, not flew, advanced 80 miles. But it flew 120 through the air mass. Remember the definition of flight and drift? Okay. Is the wind strike? No, the wind doesn't strike, the airplane doesn't strike the wind. Now I'm going to give you plane at 40 knots, the wind at 40 knots. How many nautical miles did the airplane flew? I get this. 40. It was flying 40 and drifting 40, but because it was at the same speed, stay in the same place. And we think that is hovering, which is wrong. That's not the definition of hovering. It's flying and drifting. And it seems like it's hovering because we bring the hovering word from the helicopter world to this. And that's not what it's doing. If you look at the hover definition, it doesn't cut it. It's flying and drifting, but we can't see it. It's the eye can't see what the mind doesn't know. You see it, you think it's doing that. Okay. Now I'm going to show you the one. Oh, just so you understand this. The guy is doing 120. Now it's going to start slowing down. That's why. And when it reaches 40, plane stops. But it's flying through that air mass that is stationary in relation to it because it's drifting with it at the same time. It's a very hard thing to, but in time it'll come. Now this is the one that is really the eye-opener. When I asked that question, if the wind stopped completely, what happens? Nothing happens. The airplane keeps flying. The only thing that happens is the ground speed changes. Because the airplane doesn't even know that the wind exists. Because the airplane is drifting with the wind. What we cannot see is what I'm going to show you now. There's the airplane at 40. the wind, now it's gonna slow down to 30. I couldn't figure out how to do it. So he's slowing the airplane down to 30, but now he started drifting. Now when he gets to 30, he has a minus 10 knot ground speed because he is drifting at 40, flying at 30 through the air mass, and drifting at 10 to the back. But we cannot see that. So let me show you that again. This is going back, but this is flying forward and going back at the same time. You got to remember. Now when it gets to 30, the only thing that happens is the ground speed now is minus 10. Now on the next one, the air mass is stationary. Now the airplane is flying at 30. And the air mass is stationary. Watch what's going to happen here. When the wind begins all of a sudden, it continues flying at 30. But now it's going to be drifting at 10. Actually drifting at 40. 30 that we cannot see and 10 that we can see. Now, when it gets there, the wind stops and then it keeps on flying. Like, does that make sense?
Is that why they say gas per hour, whereas in a car you say gas per mile?
Exactly, because it's what the airplane is going to fly, and that's why you figure out
Right.
the time that the air is going to fly with the E6B, and because you're only considering what the airplane is flying.
Right.
The 160, the extra 4 is a bonus. That was not part of the calculation. Now you can calculate that. But whatever you get drifting, if it's in your favor, no problem. But if it's this way, that's why you go through all that to figure out exactly how much the airplane is burning while flying.
Right. Right.
While flying. Okay, now with the takeoff, both airplanes will get to 1,000 feet at the same time. Because the wind doesn't matter. Okay? And airplane 1 developed more lift in the climb than airplane 2 is false. Because wind has nothing to do with lift. The way it's been told makes us think that way, but it isn't. And I'm going to tell you the root of that before we go. And let me just go to the last one, which says, if there is a tool to determine crosswind component in this scenario, there is none. Because the airplane is feeling no wind at all. That's why this tool is for takeoffs only and landing, which is when the airplane is feeling the wind. But once the airplane comes off the ground, the airplane is part of the wind. A 747 has a crosswind component of about 35, anywhere between, depending on the model, 32 to 37 knots. Why? Why a monster that weighs almost 1 million pounds has a crosswind component almost the same as a Cessna 310? Because what happens when the 747 reaches the lift off point, it weighs 0. And the minute it floats, it goes with the air. And the wings are so far back that they can't correct because they will drag the engines on the ground. So the airplane just goes with the wind. The minute you take off into a crosswind and you go. So this is only good for takeoffs and landing. And that's how I started to realize by asking those kind of questions after my experience. It took me like 9 years to be able to understand how to, and today I don't think I explain it. This is the first time I tried this in a group, and I appreciate you guys being here and putting up with this. I suggest that you send me comments on my email. I need feedback so I can make this better. But one thing I'm going to tell you is this: the root of the problem was Bernoulli's. And they had nothing to go by. But the Bernoulli's principle, which is correct, is told us pilots exactly as Daniel Bernoulli's wrote it in 1637, when there were no airplanes. And the Bernoulli's principle reads that as a fluid accelerates over a body, the fluid loses pressure, which is correct. But the airplane, no. The air doesn't move. The airplane moves. That's why we came up with all these terms: airstream, airfoil, which it doesn't even, the name is incorrect, because an airfoil deflects air. When you deflect something, you change the direction. What the airplane does is displaces something like a boat and a submarine. So anyway, those things in time, every time you see a picture, you see an arrow coming to an airplane and it says relative wind. What do you think that does to our mind? It makes us believers that there is some kind of wind coming. If that was the case, then when the airman is stationary, the airplane shouldn't fly. And then number two culprit was the wind tunnel, which the Wright brother had no other alternative. And it works, but that's not what happens in flight. The air doesn't go behind and keeps going because the air is not moving. The air is stationary in relation to the airplane. And then the third culprit is that we are earthlings. We're land dwellers. And the only thing we know about wind is how it affects us. And we took that belief aloft. And that was bad, I think, in my opinion. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. If you think about it, you got my email. Shoot me an email. I'd like to get some feedback. And again, it's a pleasure for me. And remember, you're going home from the airport, so you got to be careful now.